Drink up, Elena. It's for your stress. My mother slid the green smoothie across the table. She did not know I had a hidden camera in the kitchen. She did not know I had watched her crush enough heart medication into this glass to kill a horse just 10 minutes ago. She needed my life insurance money by tomorrow morning, or the loan sharks were coming for her. I did not scream. I did not call 911. I just looked at the poison. Then I turned to my spoiled sister, Emma, who was staring at my exclusive drink with pure jealousy. I smiled calmly and lifted the glass. "Wow, Mom," I said, making sure Emma heard every word. "You finally bought the expensive stuff for me." Before I tell you who drank from that glass and the secret I was hiding under the table, drop a comment telling me what is the one thing you have forgiven your family for that you should have never forgiven. I want to read your stories. You might be wondering why I did not just leave years ago. Why I stayed in that house, paying their bills, fixing their messes, and letting them treat me like an ATM with a pulse. The answer is simple. I was the utility child. Every toxic family has one. Emma was the ornament. Pretty, fragile, there to be admired and protected. I was the utility. I was the one who fixed the leaking roof when Cameron gambled away the repair money. I was the one who paid off the credit cards Susan maxed out on essential trips to Cabo. I was not loved. I was used. And for a long time, I mistook being needed for being loved. They thought I was weak. They thought I stayed because I was desperate for their approval. They did not realize that while I was writing the checks, I was also keeping the receipts. The shift happened 2 months ago. I came home from a 12-hour shift to find a foreclosure notice taped to the front door. Cameron had ignored the mortgage for 6 months. We were 48 hours away from the sheriff throwing our furniture onto the lawn. Susan was crying in the kitchen. Not because we were losing our home, but because Emma would not have a place to host her book club. Cameron was pacing, looking for someone to blame. "Fix it, Elena," he said. He did not ask. He commanded. "You have savings. Pay the arrears." I looked at him, and for the first time the fog cleared. I saw a man who would drain me dry and then complain about the dust. "I will pay it," I said, "but there is a condition." I drove them to a notary that afternoon. I paid the $50,000 in arrears. But in exchange, they signed a quitclaim deed. They transferred the title of the house solely to my name. They signed it because they were desperate and because they are arrogant. They thought it was just a piece of paper. They thought they could manipulate me into giving it back later, or that I would never actually kick them out. They thought they still owned me, so by extension, they owned the house. That signature was the first nail in their coffin. The second nail came 2 weeks ago. I stood in the living room and told them I was moving out. I had bought a condo. I was done paying their bills. Susan did not cry. She did not say she would miss me. She looked up from her magazine and asked, "But who is going to pay the property tax next month?" That night, I went into Cameron's office to look for a stamp. I found a file on his desk buried under racing forms. It was an accidental death and dismemberment insurance policy. In my name, the coverage was for $2 million. The signature at the bottom was a clumsy forgery of my own. The beneficiary had been changed from Emma to Susan. I stood there in the dark, holding the paper that put a price tag on my life. I realized then that my utility had run out. I was no longer valuable to them as a nurse or a banker. I was worth more dead. I did not confront them. I did not scream. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. I walked out of the office and I went to buy a camera. I did not confront them about the policy because confrontation gives the enemy a chance to come up with a lie. Instead, I went to a tech store 2 towns over and bought a $40 USB wall charger. It looked exactly like the cheap white block you use to charge an iPhone, except this one had a pinhole camera lens right above the USB port. I plugged it into the kitchen outlet yesterday afternoon. "My charger died," I told Susan. "Do not unplug this. I need it for my shift tomorrow." She did not even look at it. To her, it was just another piece of clutter I was responsible for. 2 hours before dinner tonight, I sat in my car down the block and opened the app on my phone. The feed was crystal clear. The first thing I heard was Cameron's voice. He was on speakerphone, pacing the kitchen floor. The voice on the other end was not a bank teller. It was a man with a gravelly, calm voice that terrified me more than any scream could. "Monday morning, Cameron," the voice said. 9 a.m. "You have the $500,000 or you leave the house in a body bag. We are done granting extensions." Cameron hung up. He looked sick. He looked like a trapped animal. "We have to do it tonight," he whispered. Susan was standing by the counter. She pulled a prescription bottle out of her purse. I recognized the orange label immediately. It was my grandmother's digoxin. She had passed away 3 months ago, and Susan had claimed she cleaned out the medicine cabinet. I thought she threw them away. I was wrong. I watched my mother pour a handful of the white pills into a mortar. She started grinding them. The sound was a rhythmic scratching, crunch, crunch, crunch. But it was not Susan's actions that broke me. It was Cameron's. He did not help her grind the pills. He did not pour the smoothie. He sat in his recliner in the living room, visible in the corner of the frame. As the sound of the grinding got louder, he picked up the remote. He did not turn around. He did not tell her to stop. He just turned up the volume on the game show he was watching. There is a specific kind of evil in passive parenting. We call it the bystander effect. But in a family, it is worse. It is the parent who says, "I never laid a hand on you," while watching the other parent beat you black and blue. Cameron told himself he was innocent. He told himself that if he did not touch the poison, he was not a killer. He was just a man watching TV while his wife solved their financial problem. His silence was his signature on my death certificate. I watched Susan dump the white powder into the blender with the kale and the expensive fruit. I watched her blend it until it was a smooth, frothy green. I watched her pour it into the crystal glass. I closed the app. I sat in my car for a long time staring at the steering wheel. I could have driven away. I could have gone to the police right then. But if I did, they would claim it was a mistake. They would claim they were just crushing meds for themselves. Without a body, without the attempt, it was just a video of a woman making a smoothie. I needed them to commit. I needed them to hand me the glass. I started the engine and drove back to the house. I walked through the front door, kissed my father on the cheek, and sat down at the table. The glass was heavy in my hand. It was cold, condensation beating on the crystal. Across the table, Cameron was vibrating with anxiety. He kept glancing at the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick-tock. 9 hours until the deadline. 9 hours until he either had my life insurance payout or a broken kneecap. I brought the glass to my lips, but I did not drink. I inhaled deeply. "Oh my God," I said, letting my eyes flutter closed. "Mom, seriously?" The room went dead silent. Susan froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What?" she whispered. "This smells exactly like that $20 glowing smoothie from the organic market downtown," I said. "The one with the collagen and the rare kale blend? I thought you said we were cutting back." I looked at Emma. "If you want to trap a rat, you use cheese. If you want to trap a narcissist, you use exclusivity." Emma did not care about health. She did not care about vegetables, but she cared about price tags. She cared about having the best thing at the table. Her head snapped up from her phone. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the glass in my hand. "Since when do you buy $20 smoothies for Elena?" she asked. Her voice was not curious. It was accusatory. "I didn't," Susan stammered. "I mean, it is just medicine for Elena's heart, for stress." "It does not smell like medicine," I said, swirling the thick green liquid. "It smells like vanilla and money. You know, I have been dying to try this for months." I brought the rim to my lips again. I tilted it just enough so the liquid touched my lip, but I did not swallow. I saw Cameron flinch. He leaned forward, his eyes hungry, waiting for the gulp. "Let me taste it," Emma said. It was not a request. It was a demand. Emma was 24, but she still operated on toddler logic. "If you have it, I want it." Susan dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "No, Emma," she said too quickly. "It is spicy. You won't like it." "I like spicy," Emma countered. She reached across the table, her manicured fingers grasping for the stem of my glass. This was the pivot point. If I handed it to her, I was liable. If I pushed it toward her, I was a murderer. But if I pulled it away, if I acted like a selfish big sister hoarding the goods. I pulled the glass back toward my chest, shielding it. Get off, Emma, I snapped. Mom made this for me. You have your own wine. That sealed it. If I had offered it, she might have been suspicious. But because I refused, she had to have it. It was a reflex. You are such a brat, Emma spat. She stood up, reaching over the centerpiece. Mom pays for everything in this house, Elena. Technically, that smoothie is mine. Emma, sit down. Susan's voice cracked. She looked at Cameron, pleading with her eyes for help. Stop her. She is going to drink the poison. But Cameron did not move. He looked at the clock. He looked at me. And then he looked at his favorite daughter, the golden child. Reaching for the chalice, he did the math. If he stopped Emma, the plan failed. I would know something was wrong. I would not drink it. The morning would come and the loan sharks would come. He needed a body. He preferred it to be mine. But in a pinch, any body would do. I saw the calculation happen behind his eyes. I saw him decide that his life was worth more than Emma's. Let her have a sip, Elena, Cameron said, his voice flat. Do not be stingy, Susan gasped. She looked at her husband with horror, realizing for the first time that there is no honor among parasites. I looked at Emma. She was smug. She thought she was winning a petty argument over a beverage. She thought she was putting me in my place. She did not know she was fighting for the right to stop her own heart. Fine, I said. I released my grip on the glass. If you want it that bad, take it. Emma snatched the glass from the table with the speed of a viper. She held it close to her chest, glaring at us like we were about to tackle her for it. Mine, she said childishly. Susan lunged. It was an instinctual, animalistic movement. She reached across the table. Her hand aimed to slap the glass out of Emma's grip. Emma, no. Do not drink that. For a split second, I thought the game was over. I thought Susan's maternal instinct would override her greed, but I forgot about the third player at the table. Cameron's hand shot out from under the tablecloth. He grabbed Susan's wrist. He did not just hold it. He squeezed it hard. I saw his knuckles turn white. Susan froze, her arms suspended in midair, her eyes wide and terrified as she looked at her husband. Time seemed to stretch. In that silence, an entire conversation happened between my parents. Cameron stared at Susan. His eyes were dark, hollow pits of desperation. Monday morning, his eyes said. The loan sharks, the broken legs, the body bag. If Susan knocked that glass over, the digoxin would be wasted on the carpet. The plan would fail. I would be alive. The insurance money would be out of reach, and by tomorrow morning Cameron would be a dead man. He was making a choice. He was weighing the life of his golden child against his own survival, and he chose himself. He gave Susan's wrist a sharp warning jerk. Let her drink. Susan made a small broken sound and stopped fighting. Tears gathered in her eyes as she looked at Emma. Whatever fear was hanging over her mattered more than saving her favorite child. Emma, unaware of the silent pact happening a few feet away, read the tension completely wrong. She thought Susan was being dramatic over an expensive smoothie. You guys are ridiculous, she scoffed. It's just a drink. She lifted the glass, met my eyes with a smug little smile, and swallowed a huge mouthful like it was a dare. I watched the green liquid disappear. There's a kind of cruel irony to the way entitlement destroys a person. Emma wasn't collapsing because of one bad decision in one moment. She was collapsing because she'd been raised on permission, trained to take what she wanted, trained to believe boundaries didn't apply to her, trained to treat my things like communal property and my protests like background noise. They built the weapon. I just set it on the table. Emma put the glass down with a satisfied clink and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Bitter, she said, wrinkling her nose. I don't get why you wanted it. Acquired taste, I said, and went back to my dinner. The next stretch of time felt endless. The clock kept ticking. Silverware scraped. Cameron ate fast like speed could outrun consequences. Susan didn't eat at all. She just stared at Emma, wide-eyed, flinching at every movement like she was waiting for a trap to snap shut. I kept eating. I kept waiting. Then Emma's hand slipped. Her fork clattered against the plate loud enough to make Susan jerk. Weird. Emma mumbled, rubbing her eyes. She squinted up at the lights. Why does everything look off? Cameron forced a tight smile. It's nothing. Just eat. Emma shook her head. No, I feel. She didn't finish. She lurched forward, gagging, and the smoothie came back up onto the pristine tablecloth. Emma. Susan screamed, already scrambling out of her chair. Emma slid sideways, hit the floor hard, and went frighteningly still. Her breathing turned shallow and wrong, like her body was forgetting how to do it. Susan dropped to her knees, sobbing, grabbing Emma's hand like she could pull her back with sheer force. Do something. Call 911. Cameron fumbled for his phone. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it. But the whole time his eyes kept flicking to me. Not to his daughter. To the witness. He got the operator, barked the address, and then smoothly, loudly started building a lie. She must have eaten something bad, he said, voice turning performative. Food poisoning. She's vomiting. Please hurry. I stared at him. My stomach went cold. He ended the call and wiped sweat from his lip like he just saved himself. Food poisoning, I said, cutting through Susan's panicked crying. That's what you told them? It must be, he stammered. She was out with friends. If they treat this like a stomach bug, I said, voice flat, they'll waste time. And she doesn't have time. Susan made a strangled sound, rocking over Emma. Oh God. Oh God. Tell them the truth, I said. I don't know what you're talking about, Cameron snapped. Too fast, too loud. He was doubling down because admitting what was really happening meant admitting there was something in this house that shouldn't exist. It meant questions. It meant police. And whatever debt was tightening around his throat mattered more to him than his daughter's life. I stood. Emma's lips were beginning to lose their color. She's crashing, I said, looking straight at Susan. You have minutes before this becomes permanent. What did she take? Nothing. Susan screamed. She didn't take anything. Stop lying, I roared. The command hit like a slap. Silence cracked open in the room. I pulled out my phone, tapped once, and held the screen up inches from Susan's face. A video played clear, unmistakable. The kitchen, the bottle, the powder, the hands, the moment it went into the drink. Cameron in the background turning up the TV like the sound could drown out guilt. Susan's eyes bulged. Cameron looked like he'd been shot. You filmed us, he whispered. I watched you, I said. And I watched you let her drink it. Outside, sirens began to rise, distant, then closer, growing teeth. They'll be here in 2 minutes, I said calmly. So, here are your options. I leaned in, voice low and lethal. Option A, you keep lying. Emma dies. And I hand this to the police. You're not explaining an accident. You're explaining intent. I shifted the phone slightly so Cameron could see every second of it. Option B. You tell the truth right now. They treat her correctly. She lives and you deal with what you actually did. Susan looked down at Emma's barely there breathing. She looked at my screen. Then she looked at Cameron. Cameron's eyes begged her without words. Don't let her go. But something in Susan finally split. 30 years of enabling. 30 years of fear shattered by the primitive terror of a mother watching her child slip away. She broke. It was the medication, she screamed, voice tearing. It was the heart pills. Please, please save her. The front door flew open. Paramedics rushed in. Equipment already in motion, followed by uniformed police. Over here, Susan sobbed, waving frantically. Please, she needs help. I stepped back and let the room become what it needed to become. Fast hands, clipped commands, oxygen, 4 lines, a monitor beeping with ruthless honesty. Then I turned to the officer hovering in the doorway, confused by the chaos. I'm the one who called earlier, I said, and placed a small USB drive in his hand. You'll want to see what led to this, especially the part where my father physically stopped my mother from intervening. His face tightened. He looked at the drive, then at Cameron, then back at me. When the paramedics stabilized Emma enough to move her, the police didn't ask questions. They gave instructions. Cameron and Susan left in handcuffs. Cameron never looked at Susan, never looked at Emma. He stared at me as if he was finally seeing the truth he'd spent decades trying to ignore. I wasn't the background child. I wasn't the utility. I was the one holding the keys. Emma survived. The doctors were blunt. If I'd waited even a little longer, she wouldn't have. She spent weeks in intensive care, and she didn't come out unchanged. But the real shift happened when I showed her the video in her hospital room. She cried when she saw Susan's hands. She went quiet, stone quiet when she saw Cameron's choice. And for the first time in her life, Emma understood she wasn't precious to them. She was useful. She was currency, just like me. She testified. It was the first genuinely selfless act she'd ever made. Maybe because she finally realized the truth. Monsters don't only live in fairy tales. Sometimes they live in your kitchen, smiling across the dinner table. The charges were heavy. The prosecutor didn't treat it like a family mistake. They treated it like what it was. They wanted a payout. They got a sentence. As for the house, I didn't keep it. I didn't want to breathe inside those walls ever again. The deed was in my name, so I cleared it out, locked it up, and listed it the day after the arrest. It's sold fast. I'm standing at an airport gate now, watching strangers drag suitcases toward futures they chose. I checked my bank account this morning. The proceeds cleared. Enough to start over anywhere. I deleted Cameron's number. Deleted Susan's. I kept Emma's, but I haven't used it yet. Maybe one day, maybe not. People say you can't choose your family. That's a lie. You can choose to leave them. You can choose to survive them. And sometimes the only revenge you need is refusing to keep drinking what they keep trying to pour. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, watching that glass in her hand, would you have knocked it away? Or would you have let the golden child take the sip? Drop your answer in the comments and share the story if you believe karma always finds them.